On behalf of Jacksonpal Pharmaceuticals Limited, I, Dr. Deepika Chabra, welcome you to the webinar today on female urinary incontinence. This webinar forms a part of a knowledge-sharing initiative by the company's Medicines Wing to keep in touch during the lockdown period. We feel honored to be banner and are indebted to the ICOG for assigning one ICOG credit point to all the attendees urogynecology with us. We have Dr. J.B. Sharma, and Dr. Rajesh Kumari with us. We also have Dr. Mala Shrivastava with us today, President AOGD. Dr. Ragini Agarwal is Clinical Director at W. Pratiksha Hospital at Gurugram. She is an endoscopic and cosmetic urogyne surgeon. Her areas of interest also include obstetrics and high-risk pregnancy. She has pioneered cosmetic gynecology in India, endoscopist of Haryana in private sector. As Vice President Foxy, Dr. Ragini Agarwal is committed to work for betterment of women's health via social programs and striving for continuous upgradation of medical knowledge of Foxy members. She is founder, Gurgaon Obs and Gynae Society, and founder president Association of Obs and Gynae Haryana, also founder president-elect of Indian Society of Aesthetic and Regenerative Gynecology, INSARG. I will now request Honorable Dr. Ragini to address the attendees and share her knowledge with all of us. Welcome, Dr. Ragini Agarwal, ma'am.
Thank you, Deepika. I'll just put my slide here. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here for this first Urogyne Committee of Foxy webinar. We and Dr. J.B. Sharma along with Dr. Rajesh Kumari will try to cover this vast subject of the urinary incontinence in a small time. We'll just go through with what is the urinary incontinence. We all know that urinary incontinence is a huge burden on the society. It affects almost 200 million people worldwide, and 1 in 4 women over 18 experience episode of leaking urine. Over 23% of the women over 60 have a deal with urinary incontinence, and because they are not much aware of the treatment or because of the embarrassment, they are not want to go to the doctors. And usually what is found that women wait an average of 6.5 years before seeking a diagnosis. And it is more common in women than men. What are the major causes of the urinary incontinence? Childbirth, menopause, aging, obesity. These are the major causes of the urinary incontinence, and comorbidities and congenital impairments with the age also play a major role for this urinary incontinence. Continence mechanism, there are 2 things we have to see. One is the bladder. There's the stabilization of the detrusor pressure and the intra-abdominal location of the bladder neck. And on the second hand, we have to see the urethra, the main hammock action, intra-abdominal location of the proximal urethra and the urethral tone. We are all aware of the types of incontinence. Either it is a stress incontinence, urge incontinence, overflow incontinence, or neurogenic incontinence due to impaired functioning of the nervous system, maybe with because of the comorbidities or because of many aging. So in stress incontinence, there's a leakage of urine with activity because of the inadequate bladder outlet resistance to counteract intra-abdominal pressure. In urge, we found the leakage of urine with the sensation of need to void. And in mixed, a part of the stress incontinence and urge incontinence is there. And overflow is because of the leakage due to the retained urine and functional incontinence as a result of the barriers to voiding. Basically, it is found in the aging population, congenital behavior or mobility impairment. My topic is mainly the SUI, a non-invasive newer treatment modalities. We all know that the SUI is the involuntary loss of urine that occurs during coughing, sneezing, or physical exertion such as sporting activity or sudden change of position. The laxity of the pelvic floor muscles that support the bladder may be attributable to childbirth, prior pelvic surgery, or fracture, neurological dysfunction, and possibly the loss of the estrogen during menopause. In severe case, there may also be the gravitational loss of urine, which postural changes, a condition that is due to the sphincter abnormalities. While intrinsic sphincter deficiency is one cause of SUI, most common type of the SUI is associated with the urethral hypermobility. Urodynamic stress incontinence is noted during filling cystometry and is defined as the involuntary leakage of the urine during increased abdominal pressure in the absence of a detrusor contraction. The main point in the SUI is a detrusor muscle contraction is absolutely normal. 5 to 69% women have at least one episode of the SUI, and yes, genetic component can have a part of the UI, especially in the stress urinary incontinence. So if we grade the SUI, there's a grade 1, urine loss only with the coughing, sneezing, lifting heavy objects. Grade 2 is urine loss with the minimal activities, walking, rising from the sitting position, and grade 3 totally incontinent in the upright position. So it is very clear seeing these symptoms how much it is going to the effect of the quality of the life of the woman who is suffering with the SUI. Just directly coming to the manage, there are many traditional non-surgical options available for the treatment of SUI, as well as many surgical options. However, for women who have failed traditional treatments and cannot or do not wish to undergo surgery, there are few non-surgical options are available. Although they need more research, I'm going to focus mainly on this part of the non-surgical options. So what we have as traditional non-surgical treatment with us: behavioral therapy, biofeedback, pelvic floor stimulation, bladder training, use of pessaries, lifestyle modification, intermittent self-catheterization, treatment of the medical comorbidities. So any patient to coming with the SUI, we are not going to jump directly for the any non-surgical or the surgical treatment. First, we have to talk to the patient, understand problem, and give a 3 months of the traditional non-surgical treatments. And I usually prefer to go for the pelvic floor stimulation or pelvic muscle training. There are two things in the there's a pelvic floor muscle training, which is also known as the Kegel exercise, and may include pelvic muscle electrical stimulation. These are the widely used for the first line treatment and sometimes combined with the other non-surgical treatment. So treating these patients, many times we have to combine 1 or 2 modalities and then reach to an optimum result of the 70 to 80% to these patients. So there's something called Kegel Master. It is available on the net, because when we say the patient to do the Kegel exercise, we have to explain it properly how to do the Kegel exercise. Even then, it is not possible to give so much of the stress and strain on the muscle to attain the proper. So second thing is the electrical stimulation of the pelvic floor. What is this? It is a totally painless and effective procedure that treats urinary incontinence, frequency, and urgency. What we do, there's a tiny probe inserted in the vagina, which emits a very low-grade self-electrical signal to excite a set of nerves or the muscle for a session of 20 to 30 minutes. And this simple and effective office therapy is FDA approved. We all know about the surgical intervention. No doubt, it is a gold standard, the suburethral sling, and in the few cases we can go for the Calco suspension, but it can be another talk in detail. So coming to the newer non-surgical modalities, basically filling the treatment gap between the surgical part and the traditional therapies. So considerable effort has been directed toward developing non-surgical procedures for the women who do not respond to conservative SUI therapy, but who are not candidates for or who wish to avoid invasive surgical procedure. What we have with us: injectable bulking agents, radio frequency collagen denaturation, carbon dioxide fractional laser, HIFIM chairs, and PRP and the stem cells. So injectable bulking agents, they are totally FDA approved, and they are the treatment for the intrinsic and sphincter deficiency. Although it is found the patient can be recruited with a hypermobility also, because many patients have a mixed type of incontinence. The bulking agent is injected with the use of a cystoscope, and the multiple injection may be required to achieve and maintain continence. Here that cystoscope sheath is little bit different with our traditional cystoscope sheath, because when we inject the material, it is goes little, passes the wall of the urethra and goes towards the paraurethral region. So safety with these products appear to be generally good, although serious complications rarely occur, such as the migration of the bulking material into the other tissues and the urethral erosion. So there are many compounds are found in the USA which are allowed to use, but today which is more popular are the GACs and the polydimethyl silicon. The declining efficacy of the most bulking agents over time can limit their use, and the cost effectiveness can become an issue with repeated procedure. The ideal bulking agent has not yet been identified, because such an agent would be inert, long-lasting, non-migrating, adjustable, and easy to inject. And the autologous fat injection is not to be done, because it is very easily absorbed and can migrate and can cause the fat embolism. Transurethral radiofrequency collagen denaturation, again it is a FDA approved a non-surgical method, and this procedure differs from in two important ways from the surgical radiofrequency collagen denaturation. The newer collagen denaturation treatment is a non-surgical procedure that does not require an incision and can be performed by the trained specialist in an outpatient or the office setting under local anesthesia. Radiofrequency bladder neck suspension is an ablation procedure that causes necrosis and the gross tissue shrinkage. So from that operative mode, it has become totally non-surgical. And if you see in the diagram, it is just a bulb-like structure which is heated by the radiofrequency and raise the temperature to the 65 degrees centigrade and leads the denaturation of the collagen and the collagen remodeling. And women can return to the most normal daily activities in the same day or the next day. So upon healing, the collagen in the treated areas renatures in a more compact and the less compliant structural pattern. There's lots of literature is present on the net. If you go for the both, so for the radiofrequency bladder neck suspension or this new method of the Renaissance. Now I'll come to the HIFM technology. This is a wonderful thing and absolutely non-invasive. Patient has to sit on this chair in the clothes. Mechanism of the action technology uses high intensity focused electromagnetic fields which are generated by a coil positioned inside a chair applicator, and high intensity focused electromagnetic fields interact and depolarize the pelvic floor motor neurons, and fields deliver focused electromagnetic energy in full pelvic floor area, which results in the selective and supramaximal pelvic floor muscles contractions. Usually what is recommended is that 2 sessions in a week up to the 6 weeks. And for its myostimulative effect, the method is used in the pelvic floor muscle strengthening in order to address the SUI. The patient affected by SUI is not able to contract pelvic floor muscles selectively. Therefore, HIFM represents targeted pelvic floor muscles strengthening and the re-education. Now, coming to the next modality, carbon dioxide fractionated laser, which is very much I'm using it for many indication. One of them is the SUI, but we have to select our patient. If we see a very moderate to severe degree of the SUI, patient has been having cystocele, rectocele, prolapse, and if we are going to treat those patients with a carbon dioxide fractionated laser, they are not going to affect. So the selection of the patient is very, very important, and it is a good modality for the mild to moderate variety. Many times we combine 2 or 3 modalities like carbon dioxide fractional laser, PRP, along with the HIFM. So each and every patient has to be customized for the SUI treatment. So here what happened, SUI is characterized by the altered metabolism of the connective tissue that causes decreased collagen production, leading to the insufficient support of the urogenital tract. Medical use of the thermal energy was introduced as a potential strategy for the treatment of the urinary incontinence, and for in dermatology, for this tightness, for the collagen remodeling, it was being used for many years. So this laser energy may induce collagen denaturation, remodeling, and neogenesis, giving immediate tightening of the collagen fibril formation and more elastic tissue after treatment. This transvaginal use of the thermoablative fractional carbon dioxide laser can activate collagen to promote elastin formation and modulate the activation of the metalloproteinases at the molecular level. It generates controlled thermal damage with a further wound healing response that physiologically stimulates fibroblasts to produce neocollagenesis. This seems to be an attractive alternative method and the best option for the patient with the GSM and the mild SUI who either do not have a surgical indication or have a contraindication to the surgery or do not wish to undergo an invasive procedure. The thing is that whether we are using this laser method or we are injecting the radio frequency, this bulking agent, whenever we do any procedure, patient examination is must, and we must have a vaginal swab culture and the urinary culture, especially in the radio frequency. In the bulking agents, and in the bulking agent, it is always mandatory to give a pre-op and a post-op antibiotic. If patient is having an active infection, first you treat the infection, only then go for the procedure. And in my case, mostly I advise my patient to use the condom also. I don't want any cross infection in these patients. Now coming to the PRP in the SUI, the repeat urethral sphincter injection of the PRP is safe and effective to increase urethral sphincter resistance and provide greater reduction of the urinary incontinence in patients with the SUI due to ISD with minimal adverse events. In patients who have mild to moderate ISD and SUI, PRP can increase external sphincter tone, but still these things are in very initial stage. Still many regulatory bodies are not said okay to them. When you give this treatment to the patient, you have to consult that patient, take in documentation, the writing, what you are doing, and patient is explained for each and everything. But we are getting joining the laser treatment with the PRP and getting a very good results. There's a use of the stem cell for SUI is found in the literature. There's a transurethral ultrasound guided injection of the autologous myoblast and the fibroblast obtained from the skeletal muscle biopsies. 1 year follow-up had a success of the 70 to 90 years. So this tissue engineering can be an ideal urethral bulking agent in the form of the myoblasts, fibroblasts, neuronal stem cells. They have to injected ultrasound guided, and they act as a mechanical bulking and the improvement of the muscular function. So this is the care pathway of the female stress urinary incontinence taken from the net. And I added these, what I am doing, the HIFM PRP injection and the transurethral collagen denaturation can be, it is added in this care pathway of the female stress urinary incontinence. If you see, the medical history is very, very important. You have to exclude the diabetes, and bladder diary maintenance is must. And if you think patient can subject it to the urodynamics. To conclude my talk, SUI affects women of all ages, becoming more prevalent with the increasing age. While many non-surgical therapies are available for the treatment of stress urinary incontinence, options are limited for the women who fail to respond to these therapies, yet may not be the candidates for which to avoid surgery. This limitation prompted efforts to develop less invasive procedure for treating SUI patients, including bulking agent, transurethral radiofrequency collagen denaturation system, lasers, HIFM and PRP injection are quite helpful. Each of these minimal invasive options appears to present an intermediate management step after conservative therapy, but prior to surgery. These are the references from where I have taken in my talk. Thank you so much. I will finish with the some women cross their legs to strike a sexy pose at my age. It is a bladder control. Thank you so much for your patient hearing. Thank you, organizer, and the all sources from where many inputs are taken.
Dr.
Mala,
Mala,
on कर लीजिए.
Dr. Mala Srivastava, आप unmute कर लीजिए.
Hello.
I'll hand over to Dr. Mala.
Thanks, Dr. Ragini. That was an excellent deliberation from your side. And I'm sure the viewers must have extremely benefited from your lecture. We'll take the question answers at the end of the session. We move on to the next lecture of the time. The next lecture is by Dr. J.B. Sharma. He's the professor, Department of Obs and Gynae, All India Institute of Medical Sciences. He's also the chairperson of the Urogynae Committee of FOGSI. Sir is editor of, chief editor of Indian Journal Obs and Gynae, and he has lots of contribution to the Department of Urogynae, to the field of Urogynae, as well as other fields of gynae and obstetrics. Over to you, sir.
Sir, unmute कर लीजिए.
Okay, unmute कर. अच्छा अच्छा हाँ. Hi, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Mala, and heartiest congratulations for becoming AOGD president and taking over in this difficult time. And I'm really thankful to Dr. Agni for the excellent lecture. I mean, in fact, half of my job has been made easy by her. She has nicely highlighted the stress urinary incontinence and the basic mechanism of it and how we can treat it without surgical means. So, I mean, there may be some duplication of slide, but I'll try to restrict more on the other aspects of SUI. So we can now start. Thank you. Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. So I will be speaking on urinary incontinence, and basically I'm a chairperson of Urogynae Committee of FOGSI also. So we are doing this activity under banner of Urogynae Committee as well as AOGD and Hargobind. So we all know Dr. Agni has already highlighted that urinary incontinence prevalence increases as age advances, and almost 18 to 28% of the women sometime will have SUI or other type of incontinence. So the continence mechanism has been highlighted by Dr. Agni, but just to highlight that the bladder is stabilized of your detrusor pressure, and intra-abdominal location of the bladder neck makes us continent. Similarly, the hammock mechanism and intra-abdominal location of proximal urethra and urethral muscle tone. So these three factors are very, very important, and that proximal urethra is intra-abdominal. So what happens actually during childbirth trauma, there is trauma to this part, and then the intra-abdominal location of the proximal urethra is disturbed, and it comes out. So that's why patient starts leaking urine. So this is the urethral sport, and extrinsic, endopelvic fascia as well as levator ani muscles. Then intrinsic are the smooth muscle tone, mucosal coaptation, and some mucous venous plexus. So this is what happens actually as age advances. So this mucosal coaptation and some mucous venous plexus, they become less because of estrogen lag. So that's why you see that though the childbirth trauma occurs at young age, between 20 to 30 years of age, but patient may remain continent at that time, and she may become incontinent after age of 40 years, when this the third aspect, that means the mucosal coaptation and some mucous venous plexus become less because of estrogen lag. So the seeds are shown in young age, but they appear in the old age. So stress incontinence already highlighted, basically involuntary leakage of urine on coughing or sneezing. So, and that means any intra-abdominal pressure raised will make us leak. That is called SUI. And McGurry classification is that type 1, type 2 occur because of urethral hypermobility, while type 3 because of intrinsic sphincter deficiency. And the prevalence, millions of women, as Dr. Ragni highlighted, and 10 to 40% of all age group, and worldwide SUI accounts for 50%, mixed incontinence for about 29%. In India, we did a study, so almost 8 to 9% of daily clinics showed urinary incontinence, but the incidence is much higher because many times patients are not coming to the clinics for SUI symptoms. Only when you ask them direct questions, then you know the symptom. And we did a study on pregnant ladies, and so there is a very high prevalence of urological symptoms during pregnancy as compared to before pregnancy, with the incidence of SUI being 19% in second and 21% in third trimester in a study done by us at AIIMS. So, but with, this is, came as an eye opener to us because we specifically asked them questions. These patients never complained of SUI of their own. So you have to keep your eye open for this. So what is important, Dr. Agni also highlighted that detailed history taking is very, very crucial. It should be taken including neurological history, obstetric history, gynecological history, past surgery, any medication or medical condition. This is very crucial because many times I keep getting patient referral to me for, surgical operation. And when you ask in detail, patient may be having diabetes, diabetic neuropathy, diabetic nephropathy. Similarly, I had a patient who had multiple sclerosis. I had a patient who had surgery done, for meningomyelocele. So that is very important. I mean, rather than doing surgery for urogyne procedure on them, we have to treat their medical condition, especially neurological condition beforehand. So similarly, detailed general physical examination, including neurological examination, abdominal examination, should be done in all the cases. So neurological examination should be done in these patients. And detailed gynecological examination, any associated genital prolapse, any anal prolapse, that is also important because when the childbirth trauma occurs, it affects the perineum also. So patient may have anal prolapse also. I have observed patients having both types of prolapses. Then the leak test, Boney's test, we put 2 fingers on either side of the urethra and ask the patient to cough. And if she leaks urine, but when we put the finger, then the leaking stops. So this is Boney test positive. That will tell us that our like Burns corpus suspension or other operations are going to be successful or not. Then speculum examination for any gynecological problem. Vaginal examination we do, including for levator tone. So this will, sometimes the patient may have prolapsed uterus because of some pelvic mass. So we have seen cases of pelvic mass pushing the uterus down. So that's why vaginal examination is also important in them. The investigations are like hemogram, urine complete, albumin, sugar, microscopic culture because sometimes patient may have associated UTI, X-ray chest because patient may have chronic obstructive airway disease, he may have pulmonary tuberculosis, which is raising her intra-abdominal pressure, and that may be the cause of SUI. And this is also important because if you want to do some operation on this lady, I have to treat her chronic obstructive airway disease beforehand. And similarly, history of smoking, alcohol, etc. should be asked, and we can ask the patient to stop that. Then urodynamic studies, the Dr. Ragni also highlighted, not mandatory in every single case, but in difficult patients, you can do urodynamic studies and any other appropriate investigation as per the case. So this is so we have now 2 main symptoms. One is urge incontinence or active bladder syndrome, and the other is stress urinary incontinence. So the patient comes to you. I mean, basically grossly we can differentiate between the 2 conditions. In case of urge incontinence or active bladder syndrome, if patient has to go, she has to go. Like, someone is in the toilet, but she cannot control, she cannot hold on to it. So that is called urge incontinence. That means there is urgency to pass urine. Okay, while SUI is the patient leaks urine on coughing or raised intra-abdominal pressure. So in case of urge incontinence or active bladder syndrome, I want to highlight the treatment is mainly non-surgical. So medical treatment is there. And in this case, the lifestyle changes, bladder training, drugs, which we'll be discussing, neuromodulation, augmented cystoplasty, that will be very, very rarely done. In fact, I have never done any of these operations for these patients. So 99% of patients can be treated very nicely with medical treatment only, which we'll be discussing. So this is the lifestyle modification. Dr. Agni also highlighted that we have to reduce tea, coffee, diuretic and bladder irritant in these patients. So this is very important. If you get a patient of you who has got urge incontinence, that means he has she going to washroom for 20 times a day, 10 times in the night like that. So that means in the case of urge incontinence. So in this case, the patient detailed history is to be taken, and patient will tell us that I have a patient, in fact, who I offered her coffee, and she said, if I take coffee, I'll go to washroom 10 times in 1 hour. You can say, so for her that coffee was a bladder irritant. I had another patient who had, Coca-Cola and all as a bladder irritant. So we have to find our own irritants, for that, and then patient can avoid that thing. Similarly, some patient may be on diuretics. I mean, if you ask the detailed history, patient may be on diuretic and that's why she's passing urine. So then you can change the diuretic for that patient. Like suppose she's taking diuretic for hypertension, so we can switch on to some other antihypertensive with the help of physicians or cardiologists. Then, so similarly, avoid carbonated drinks, Coke, etc., artificial sweetener. Then drink moderate volume of fluid. This I'm also seeing that many patients are drinking 2-3 liters of water every day. This is also beauty therapy going on that, it makes our face glowing. No, so we have to restrict our fluid intake. It should not be more than 1.5 liter a day, because then that will have, wrong impression on the bladder, and patient will have leaking of the urine. Then empty bladder before going to sleep is important, so that the patient will get up less in the night. Avoid constipation, that is very important. And similarly, avoid cough, avoid weight reduction is very useful. Smoking cessation. So those women who are smoking, I mean, this is a good opportunity. We can ask them to stop smoking, because that will also take care of their lungs also. And advise women with urinary incontinence or OAB who have a BMI, green tea, and then to lose weight. So this is, so drink less coffee, and so bladder training. What is bladder training? Basically, try to pass unit regular interval by clock. So this is important in bladder training. Basically, we have to retrain our bladder. Like, normal bladder can hold easily for 3 hours, but the bladder of a patient who has got urgent incontinence will not be able to hold urine for maybe 1 hour, 1.5 to 2 hours. So what we can do is that we can increase it. So maybe initially 1 week patient passes urine every hour. Then next week 1 hour 50 minutes. Next week 1 hour 30 minutes. Next week 1 hour 45 minutes. Then 2 hours. Like that we can go on till we reach the 3-hourly goal. So this is gradually, and even if some patient may leak urine, it's okay, she can change the clothes. So this will aim basically to increase the capacity of the bladder. So this is very, very important, and this costs nothing, good for the patient. So we must try it for at least 6 weeks to 3 months before switching on to the other treatment. And these are the drugs. So usually the patients of overactive bladder syndrome or urgent incontinence will require some antimuscarinic drugs. So we know that these are the basically, muscarinic receptors are there in the bladder. So we have to give antimuscarinic drugs. So the standard drugs, like you can say tolterodine, solifenacin, derifenacin. Then we have older drugs like oxybutynin, antidepressant like imipramine, loxetine is more useful for SUI. So these are the drugs. Then alpha adrenergic antagonist, and then beta adrenergic antagonist, toxins, and hormones. But let me tell you grossly, I mean, rather than remembering 10 to 12, 20 drugs, I tend to use only 2 or 3 drugs. So one of such drugs, you can use derifenacin, solifenacin. They are one of the best antimuscarinic drugs in the current practice. Solifenacin, you use 5 milligram once a day, and at the most you can go to 10 milligram a day. Derifenacin equivalent dose is 7.5 milligram once a day, and at the most you can go up to 15 milligram a day. So these are the very good drugs, and they have lesser side effects in the form of dry mouth, because they're antimuscarinic drugs. So they will have antimuscarinic side effects also, like dry eyes, dry mouth, and sometimes they can worsen the closed angle glaucoma. So you have to check that also. So I tend to put these patients on like derifenacin 7.5 milligram once a day, along with bladder training. That means they pass urine by clock, and then I reduce their tea and coffee. They reduce weight also. And then I see the patient after 3 months, and you give her realistic expectation that, look, your OAB is not going to disappear altogether, but you will be benefited maybe 50 to 60%. So by doing like and don't see her every week or so, I see her after 3 months. So after 3 months now, I aim that patient should have lost 2 to 3 kg of weight. If she is a smoker, she should have stopped smoking or decreased significantly. If she is a like she drinks wine, she should decrease that also. She take tea to coffee and excess of caffeinated drinks or beverage drinks, she should reduce that also. And I have given her solifenacin or derifenacin, so that also will help her. So I mean, about 50 to 60% relief I'm expecting in her, and plus bladder training will also help her. So after 3 months, I see her again, and I ask her. So she says, okay, Dr. Sharma, I'm about 50 to 60% benefited. So then I tell her that, okay, we continue with everything same, and we see her again after 3 months. So by this time, another 10 to 20%. So aim is that by 1 to 2 years, ultimately you may get 60, 70, maybe 80% relief. And after 2 years, you can give a drug holiday also to the patient. So aim is that by this time, we can stop the medication after 2 years, but patient is doing bladder training, patient is doing pelvic floor exercise also, which Dr. Agni highlighted. These pelvic floor exercises are good and they cost nothing. So aim is that, and so she had reduced tea, coffee, she had reduced 5 kg weight, she's taking less tea, coffee, she's doing bladder training. She has taken 2 years of antimuscarinic drug. So now I'll stop the antimuscarinic drug, give her a drug holiday for 3 months, and I will see again later on. And then I ask the patient, how are you? And sometimes some patients say that I was better off on the antimuscarinic drug. So you can switch on to the antimuscarinic drug again. They can easily be taken for 4 to 5 years, no problem. Now, if the patient has got some patients may have like closed angle glaucoma, or they cannot tolerate antimuscarinic drugs because of side effects, and then but their heart is normal, then you can also give the new drug to them, that is adrenergic receptor agonist, that is mirabegron. So mirabegron is 25 milligram once a day, and that usually adequate dose. And this tea again, same, the regimen is same. See after 3 months. And mirabegron is also combined with again bladder training, decreased tea, coffee intake, decreased weight, and other this thing, and keep on seeing the patient. So I give only 2 drugs these days. I mean, one is derifenazine, antimuscarinic to all patients of heart disease or other patients. But if the patient has got closed angle glaucoma or too much side effect of antimuscarinic, then I give her mirabegron 25 milligram once a day. Maximum dose is 50 milligram, but usually 25 is good enough. So this is, and usually most of the patients, 70 to 80% will be benefited in about 2 years time. And so this is already we have discussed antioxybutynin drug, tolterodine, sulfenacin. Fluoxetine is one such drug, is 100 milligram 2 to 3 times a day. Older drug, but not very effective. ADH analogs are more useful for nocturnal enuresis. Okay, and so mirabegron has had this for 25 to 50 milligram daily. Beta 3 adrenal receptor again agonist. It's useful for patients who have closed angle glaucoma or patients who basically have side effects with the antimuscarinic drugs. But avoid mirabegron in patients of hypertension and cardiac disease. Okay, then Botox, that is basically neurotoxin produced by Clostridium botulinum. So it can be injected. It's an injection, and cystoscopically the urologist inject it. I mean, we dilute basically it in 10 ml solution, and 1 ml is given at 10 places in the bladder, excepting in the bladder trigone area. So cystoscopically, with only thing cost is expensive, 25 to 30,000 rupees, and the effect lasts for about 6 months only. So this can be used, Botox A. And so similarly, these are other, drugs. So usually, I tend to give them medical treatment only, and we review them after every 3 to 6 months. Neuromodulation already highlighted by Dr. Agni also. So you can use the transcutaneous sacral nerve stimulation, transcutaneous post-tibial nerve stimulation, pudendal nerve stimulation. But personally, we are not using them here, but botulinum toxin sometimes can be done. And surgery, just to complete the list, basically, I had never done a surgery on these patients, but very rarely the bladder capacity is so much reduced that they, or because of radiation cystitis, that very rarely with the help of urologists or surgeons, we can augment their bladder, with the help of piece of ileum or sigmoid colon. So usually a piece of ileum, so we can increase the size of the bladder with that. And detrusor myotomy is that removal of the bladder myotomy basically. That is also very rare operation. But usually 99% patients are benefited by medical treatment, and surgical treatment is usually not done in case of urgent incontinence, while it's a standard treatment in case of stress incontinence we will be discussing. Urinary diversion as a last resort. Okay, so surgery is almost never done. And functional incontinence, Dr. Rajni also highlighted, these are the like delirium, infection, atrophic urethritis, pharma agents, psychological causes, excessive urine production, restricted mobility, stool infection. Okay, so this is the take-home message as far as urgent incontinence is concerned, almost 45 to 50% patients. And then now I'll be discussing about stress incontinence, though it has been highlighted by Dr. Agni also, another 7 to 8 minutes. So in this case, first we try the non-surgical treatment, which I'll not touch because Dr. Agni also already highlighted. Okay, that means lifestyle changes, pelvic floor muscle training, and the laser treatment which she highlighted. But usually the patients mild to moderate SUI patient may be benefited by the medical treatment or non-surgical treatment. But 70-80% patient, especially those with severe incontinence, will require some surgical treatment. So that can be colpo suspension, sling procedure, needle suspension, anti-colporephy, peripheral injection, which Dr. Agni also highlighted. So basically, so this already done, I won't be repeating it. Kegel exercises, vaginal cone therapy, vaginal luteal devices, and so the pessary is in control, already highlighted. And only one drug works in SUI. Like there are many drugs for urgent incontinence, but for SUI we use duloxetine, and this is 40 to too much. I use 20 to 40 milligram a day. So that can be used for 3 to 6 months. It will work in mild to moderate SUI, but usually not for severe incontinence. So duloxetine can be tried, and 50% reduction is there. But usually the patients of moderate to severe incontinence, so you can start them, as Dr. Agni highlighted, medical treatment, laser treatment, or this thing, and you can reassess or duloxetine treatment, and we reassess the patient after 3 to 6 months of therapy. Like here in AIIMS, we have got 3 to 6 months waiting list for surgery. So I give the patient medical treatment, drug, she loses weight also, and I assess her after 3 to 6 months on duloxetine, and I ask her, how are you? Meanwhile, I put in the name in the surgical list basically. So if she says she is fine, then we can continue the medical treatment or laser treatment, as Dr. Agni highlighted. But otherwise, then I take her for surgical procedure. Now, in surgical procedure, I tend to do only 2 operations. One is colposuspension operation. Those patients who cannot afford tapes, and also we can do colposuspension operation. It's a major operation, can be done by laparoscopy, can be done by laparoscopy. So in this case, basically what we do, we elevate the proximal urethra and bladder neck to intra-abdominal location and transfix the endopelvic fascia. Okay, so MMK operation is no longer done. So we do the Burch colposuspension. That means we do the vagina is suspended to the ipsilateral iliopectineal ligament. I will be showing the picture also. So you can see this picture. In this case, what happened? The patient is put in simultaneous position, and we basically one assistant is standing between the 2 thighs of the patient, and we put a Foley's catheter, and then that assistant is from below is pulling the catheter out, and now I open the abdomen by transverse incision, suprapubic, and but I don't open the peritoneum. And then I go and work in the cave of Riccius. So my hand will be stopped, you can see, by the bladder and bladder neck. So the catheter has been put already. So the inflated bulb of the catheter is bladder neck, and catheter itself is urethra. And then my assistant will lift the, say, left side of the vagina. That means, and I'm holding the bladder neck in my left index and middle finger. And then I take a suture. My assistant has lifted the vagina for me. So I take a stitch, non-absorbable, usually Prolene, on the left side in the vagina. So you can see this arrow basically. So not in the bladder, not in the bladder neck, not in the urethra, but very close to them. I take a deep bite, 2 stitches I take here, but not up to the vaginal mucosa. So thick bite in the vagina up to not mucosa, and then I stitch to the ipsilateral Cooper's ligament on either side. So not to the pubic symphysis, but Cooper ligament, which are about 1.5 to 2 centimeter lateral to the pubic symphysis. And then, so don't tie it at that time. And then I do the same thing on the right side. 2 stitches on the left side, 2 stitches on the right side. My assistant will help me from below to show me the right side of the vagina. And I will all the time, I'll be holding the bladder neck and the urethra in my hand, so that, and so because risky that if I take a stitch, I can go into the bladder, I can go to the urethra. So we have to take care of that. So, and then in the end, I tie the stitches to the ipsilateral Cooper ligament. So it's called colposuspension. That means colpo means vagina. Suspension, it has been suspended to the ipsilateral Cooper's ligament. So, and usually, and we keep the Foley's catheter for about 5 days, and patient goes home after 5 days. So it's a brilliant operation. The success rate is about 80 to 90%. And but some patient may have little bit have difficulty in passing urine. So almost 90% cure rate at 1 year, 70% at 5 years. So most effective treatment modality for genital stress incontinence, and it is coming back into practice because of the negative publicity of the tapes. Because tapes have foreign bodies, so they can cause erosion. So and like in UK, their tapes are no longer available. So then we can do colposuspension for them. Okay, only thing it has de novo deterioration stability in about 10% patient, voiding difficulty in 5% patient, posterior compartment defect 7%. Osteotic view does not happen with the Burch, it happens with MMK operation. The results of open laparoscopy are almost synonymous, but with open they are slightly better than laparoscopy, but with experience, the laparoscopy can also achieve almost the same results. Okay, and then we can use the now other option that we can use the tapes also, but there has been some problem with the tapes, and US FDA has warned against them. They have not banned them, but they have been given warning, and in UK the tapes are no longer available. Okay, so we can use the autologous fascia. So fascia lata is one such thing, or rectus fascia is another thing. Okay, so we have done a thesis in AIIMS, 15 patients we have operated. We have used the rectus fascia of that. I'll be showing the slide also. So that can be done. And then, so most studies on patients with failed surgery, we can do the sling procedure. Short-term cure rate is about 82%. So these are the various sling procedures, voiding difficulty 8%, de novo that was 8%, and all. So you can do the needle suspension, okay, by bladder neck by permanent sutures. And so this is the needle suspension, not very commonly done. And anticolporaphy has been traditionally done by our senior gynecologist with the Kelly's plication, and or when we are doing vaginal hysterectomy, we can do anticolporaphy with Kelly's plication. It has got almost 60%, 50 to 60% success. Not very good, so usually we tend to do tape or Burch, which is a better operation. Then this tension-free vaginal tape, it has been a very good. It's basically a self-retaining knitted Prolene mesh. In this case, tape is not suited to any structure. That's why it's called tension-free. So these are the two basically needle carriers. So we put what we do basically, we put a vaginal incision and the patient in lithotomy position, and using these two tapes, basically needle carriers, we bring it to the anti-abdominal on either side of the bladder neck, and we do the cystoscopy to see that we have not entered the bladder neck. So ultimately, this tape, which is polypropylene mesh, basically, it is put in the mid urethra, and it basically we come in the anti-abdominal wall. So ultimately, the tape is in the mid urethra, and we don't stitch it anyway. That's why it's called tension-free vaginal tape. Only problem is that with this standard TVT, there is 8 to 10% risk of bladder injury. So that's why now trans-obturated tape has been available. It can be outside in or inside out. I tend to use inside out more often. So this is the inside out, you can say. So we give vertical incision in the vagina, separate the urethra from the bladder neck, and then we basically bring the, on either side we put a Foley's catheter, and we bring the tape out through the needle carriers on either side in the obturator foramen, you can see in this case. So rather than the anti-abdominal, we come out through the obturator foramen. Advantage that there is very almost negligible risk of bladder injury or urethra with this, but some like patients, because the tape is coming out through the groin, so patient may have some groin pain post-operatively. So let's say that's TVT for stationary and TVT, O, that means obturator tape. So novel surgical technique, we pass through obturator foramen, specially designed helical passers, and accurate, quick and simple procedure. No risk of damage to urethra or bladder, and we don't have to do cystoscopy for them. So this is how the tape is put, you can see. So if we compare Burns corpus suspension, needle stitch, needle operation, Kelly's, slings, or TVT, so results of Burns are highest, but almost, the tapes are also very good results. Long-term success are also high. Okay. So urodynamic evaluation essential before surgery, but typical case you may avoid it also. Burns corpus is the gold standard for GSI. Anticoagulopathy not recommended as initial procedure in GSI. And TVT is a promising modality, but long outcome is awaited, and TVT should be combined with vaginal hysterectomy for prolapse in GST. Hormone replacement therapy can be done for some patients with symptoms, like estradiol can be used. Urodynamic evaluation essential before surgery, but gold standard for GSI. Anticoagulopathy not recommended as usual. So both operations like Burns corpus and TVT are highly effective, but OPTAPE requires a minor operation. Patient can be discharged home next day, so less operative time, less hospital stay, and least complication. But current status of tape is that due to adverse publicity and mesh complication and US FDA warning, artificial tapes are not available in many countries. So this has necessitated the natural facial sling like rectus fascia for SUI. So we did a prospective study on role of rectus fascia sling for SUI on 15 patients with very high success rate. So you can see in this case we have opened the abdomen by transverse incision, and I'm taking 8 into 2 centimeter rectus fascia sling. Like you can see the 8 into 2 centimeter. This is the, you can see the sling I have taken, 8 into 2 centimeter, and then we have put same, we give incision in the vaginally about 3 to 4 centimeter, and then we using a Cocker clamp, we basically from suprapubically we come on either side of the bladder neck. So I hold the bladder neck in my hand after catheterization, and then from above I put the this instrument below, and then my assistant will feed the tape to me. So you can see the tape sitting here, and then we pull the tape up. Basically you can see this incision. So now I'm putting the tape up, and you can see that I'm stitching this tape to the anterior to the rectus sheath, like here. You can see the tape is being stitched to the anterior rectus. So ultimately the tape is in the mid urethra, but it has come out to the anti-abdominal wall, anterior to the rectus sheath, and this is you can say I have now tied the tape there with the non-absorbable stitches. Okay. So and in this case, so we have done 15 cases. Only thing, this is a very strong operation. We need to put a drain for 2 to 3 days and catheter for 5 days. About 2-3 of our patients had difficulty in passing urine, so we had to keep the catheter longer. I mean, if you consider tape TVT, that is such a TVT or TOT, they are so small operation. Patient can go home in 24 hours or so. But this rectus fascia sling is a newer modality. It was done in the older time also, but it has been reinvented. And the results are very good, but only thing is that it's a major operation. Patient has to stay in hospital for a few days. Catheter has to be there for 5 days. And some patients have difficulty in passing urine, and there is a risk of hematoma also. So it's a major operation. But now if the tapes are not available, like they're still available in India, you can use them, but there is a chance that like in UK, they are not available. So either you do Burns corpus suspension or you do this rectus fascia sling. In this case, we are using the her patient's own basically fascia for the sling operation. So peritoneal bulking agents can be done. They're not routinely available in India, but they're very expensive. They work only for 6 months or so. Okay, artificial sphincter is the last resort, but it costs 7-8 lakh rupees, and I have not personally used it any time. But it's an inflatable cuff placed around the urethra to provide occlusion and reservoir to low depression, and there is a risk of cuff erosion and mechanical failure. So Dr. Agni highlighted tissue engineering, myoblast, fibroblast, stem cell can be used. I have personally, Dr. Mala was asking, we have not personally used them, but patients' own stem cells from her bone marrow can be made, and we have in aim not for, I haven't tried for SUI yet, but they have been tried for infertility patients with Asperger's syndrome. So, same way we can try this also. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dr. Sharma. That was an excellent deliberation. And I think many viewers will be having questions. I request Dr. Rajesh Kumari to take the question and regulate this session, moderate this session of question answer sessions.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Dr. Deepika. Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, ma'am. Now, there are many questions regarding these both lectures. And there is one question regarding how to work up these patients of incontinence. So we are going to
Maybe you can answer that, yeah.
Sir, I can answer. If you want to say, you want to suggest something?
No, it's okay, because Dr. Rajesh is actually, you do a lot of work on these patients. I think you will do better job than me. You do that, and then I'll add to something to that, yeah.
Thank you, sir. So whenever we are going to start a workup of a patient with incontinence, so first is we have to ask them how often they are incontinent and how much, and what are the aggravating factor and what are the improving factor, and are they using pads, or what are the effect of these incontinence on their quality of life. And now on the micturition, what are the factors which are increasing? Is there any nocturia or increased frequency, urgency, voiding symptom, hesitancy, or there is stream related any query? Then any related disease, comorbidities like COPD, diabetes, obesity, hypertension regarding. Then how to examine the patient per abdomen examination, local examination, like menopause patient, there is atrophic vaginitis, atrophic urethritis. We have to examine these all cases. Then we have to do the examination, other examination. We can do PET test in severely incontinent patient, but that is not necessary. We have to, uske liye patient ko rukna padta hai. Then Q-tip test, one question is that Q-tip test, we can also do this Q-tip test in all, and Bonis test we can do. And we have to ask them to maintain a diary, bladder diary. In bladder diary, they have to write down few points, like at what time they are incontinent, at what time they drink and how much they are drinking, and how much urine are they are passing, and how much in what time difference in interval between, and reason of incontinence like sneezing, coughing, standing, sitting, or squatting. Like these are the few. This is a basic work of incontinent patient. Now, sir, you want to add something?
Yeah, I think you have nicely highlighted. So that's what also I highlighted in my lecture also. So very detailed history taking is very, very crucial. Like I told you, I keep getting patients, our own professor had bringing their mothers and all to me, Dr. Sharma, do tape on this patient or do birth for her. She's having SUI. One gynae consultant brought the patient and, she showed me. She made her mother to lie down on the table and, she had the mama cough. And when mama coughed, there was leakage of urine everywhere. And when she said, do tape or birch on her, I said, no, let me examine her, and all her bladder was full, 600 ml. So she had overflow incontinence. So that is very, very important. Another doctor, she had multiple sclerosis and all, so don't do any operation on these patients. So proper history taking, and some patients have got like neurological. I had a patient of Parkinsonism. I had a patient of multiple sclerosis. I had a patient, doctor herself, dentist, who had surgery for meningomyelocin in childhood. So because of that, so we should not jump to surgical procedures. So that's why, as you highlighted nicely, Dr. Rajesh, so detailed history taking, proper examination, neurological examination is extremely crucial for that. Thank you.
Sir, next question is regarding duloxetine.
Regarding?
Duloxetine, sir, for SUI.
Okay.
I am not very much using this drug for SUI. Sir, what is your experience regarding this?
No, I have used it a lot. Actually, as Dr. Ragini also highlighted, basically what I do, like in AIMS, that we have got at least 3 months waiting list, maybe 6 months of the operation list. So any patient, mild to moderate SUI patient, I give them that, okay, what Dr. Ragini offered, the same treatment can be offered. They can go bladder training, pelvic floor exercises, reduce weight, treat their tea, they reduce their tea, coffee intake, they reduce their, get their diabetes treated, obesity sorted out and all, smoking stopped and all. And then I put on duloxetine, mild to moderate. So 20 milligram once a day. I don't usually go beyond that. Only one or two odd patient I went up to 40 milligram a day. So 20 milligram, and then assess the patient after 3 months. So after 3 months, some patient have 40 to 50% relief. And I ask her, how are you? I mean, are you happy with that? So some patients say, I want to continue the medical treatment. So never force surgery on them. So I said, okay, we can keep on seeing you after every 3 months. So at least about 10% of my patients of SUI are on medical treatment, including duloxetine. It gives moderate results. The results are not that brilliant as you have with overactive bladder syndrome with the anticholinergic drugs, But it can be, yes, it can be used and should be worth trying for first 3 to 6 months.
Is this drug FDA approved?
Dr. Rajesh, maybe those patients having a little bit of a component of the urge incontinence, also maybe a mixed SUI. So they have responded to the medicine treatment, because all patients, unless we go for an exhaustive urodynamic study and everything, we can't say it does not have a mixed component.
Yes, ma'am. Very well.
Yeah, I totally agree. In fact, yeah, I didn't touch mixed incontinence in my lecture, but that's a very good point Dr. Ragini has highlighted. So some of the patients actually, in fact, 25% patients have pure SUI, 25% have pure urge incontinence, but nearly 40% patients may have mixed incontinence also. So in that case, then detailed history taking, as Dr. Rajesh highlighted, is very, very crucial. So you ask the patient, what is troubling you more? So, I mean, are you like, you have to go is troubling you more, or the leaking of urine on cuffing is troubling you more? So usually it is urge incontinence which troubles them more. And in that case, basically I give them medical treatment. So you can combine the two also. I put them on 7.5 milligram derifenacin plus 20 milligram duloxetine plus pelvic floor exercises plus bladder training, tea, coffee decrease, water intake decrease, and lose weight, and assess them every 3 to 6 months. So I don't do any surgery for these patients, and you get very good results in them, because if you do surgery, it has happened, I did surgery. There was this mother of a doctor and all, so she had both. But at that time, I thought SUI was the bigger component, so I did a tape in her, and after that, her SUI completely disappeared. But now she's having urge incontinence, and now she has forgotten about SUI, so she's still not happy. So this is very important for counseling also to them, so that they have the realistic expectation from the surgery.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ragini ma'am, next question is for you. This is for you.
Counseling is very important.
Kegel Master is available in India.
But HiFem?
Ma'am, Kegel Master and HiFem.
Kegel Master is available on the net, on the Amazon.
Yeah.
Anybody can buy from there. We don't, usually we just tell the patient to buy, because if we sell anything, and if they get from the net very cheap, so it's better to tell them directly buy. And HiFem is a quite expensive machine, like laser only. It is costing somewhere between 40 to 50 lakhs, depending upon the company what we have. There's a company called Emsela, which has come recently in the market for last 1.5 years. And yes, chair is available in India. There are very few chair is still installed. And I have one of the friend has a HiFem. So we usually patients share the patient.
Okay.
Yeah, it is available in Delhi with another name, and in North India it is with in Mohali, and Dr. Vidya is having in Indore. There's few HiFem is available in India.
What is your
Rajesh Kumari ma'am?
Yes, ma'am.
I can come in, ma'am. Ma'am, there are some few hands raised which doctors would like to ask their questions. So Dr. Kirti Jetli, her answer she wants to ask. Can she ask?
Yeah.
Yes, I want to ask.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
have one friend, 92. My mother-in-law, she is age of 92 years, and she has operated both sides of neck of femur. She walk with walker, and she has urinary incontinence. After lying down, when she get up from bed, she gets pass urine. She is not able to walk even 2-3 steps.
She leaks urine.
Hmm.
Okay. Yeah, well, probably it is a very severe form of stress incontinence. At this age, most women will have actually some form of incontinence. I see a lot of patients, including I remember my colleague, he is a professor and his mother, wife of ex-governor. And also at this age, no, usually most ladies, most aunties tend to have some incontinence. And usually like, because she's far too old for any surgical treatment, we can't do Bircho tape on her. So at the most, you can try her duloxetine for, don't try it for too long. Maybe you give her for 1 week and just see, can she tolerate it? And if she can tolerate it, then you can give it for 2 to 3 months also. And otherwise, just you have to give her maybe just like nappy type thing, for the this thing. And usually at this age, we do not want to do any operations. You'll not be fit for surgery and not recommended at 92 years of age.
Another hand raised by Dr.
Thank-
Amit Sil.
Thank you.
Okay.
So can Dr. Amit Sil ask his question?
Yeah, sure.
Dr. Amit Sil, please unmute yourself to ask. I think he's not able to unmute. Dr. Parul Agarwal wants to ask.
Yes.
So thank you for such an excellent session. I just wanted to ask the difference between TVT inside out and outside in approach.
Not TVT, TOT basically, TVTO. Okay, so it's trans-obturated tape, so we can do it either way. I mean, from medial to lateral side or lateral to medial side. All results of the two are almost equal. But like the one which I am using is the Johnson one, Abrevio, that is from inside out. So I feel more comfortable with that. In that case, we make vertical incision, separate the urethra from the vaginal mucosa, and then we come out through the obturator foramen. In the outside in, the tape which has been used by Dr. Vineet Mishra and all, in that case, the needle, basically type of needle is different. It's, not half. So in that case, same thing, basically we put a finger, dissection is same. We make a vertical incision, separate the urethra from the vaginal mucosa, and then from lateral to middle, we give a stab in the obturator foramen, and lateral to middle with a special needle, we come out and we bring the needle medially, near the urethra. And then we basically thread the tape into that and we come out like that. So it's the inside out and, outside in, and the other one is inside out. Like that you can use basically. So
Thank you, sir.
Whatever way you have been trained, like I know I have been trained more, and Rajesh also does the same thing basically. We do more of inside out, that Johnson one, but outside in, those were the results of the two are almost equal. So whatever way you are basically trained, you can use the two equal good results.
Dr. Rajesh, with your permission, we have Dr. Amit Sil also. He wants to ask a question. Can we ask? Yeah.
Yes. In case of GSI, the two basic things are there. Either it is hypermobile urethra or it is ISD. Now, to differentiate between the two, either you will have to go for urodynamics or clinically with the calf stress test, whether if the leakage occurs with the first calf, usually it indicates there is ISD. Now, differentiating between the two, will have to choose the operation. Either you will use retropubic tape or use TVT. So is it?
In case of, that's a very good question. If you find out intrinsic sphincter deficiency, the incidence of, as Dr. Ragini highlighted, most of the patient have hypermobility. 70 to 80% SUI is because of hypermobility, for which Birch or TVT or TOT, all the three will work. But if you have intrinsic sphincter deficiency, about 20% cases are there. In that case, standard TVT, abdominal one, is superior actually than TOT. But the only problem is that now I'm not finding TVT easily from the patients. So then, but this Birch will work for all of them actually.
Now, while TVT is superior over TOT in case of ISD, is it the direction of the track? It is C-shaped and another is V-shaped?
Yeah, probably because of, the basic etiopathogenesis is like that, no? So for case of intrinsic sphincter, that's what I have read in the literature, that Dr. Aparna Hegde also says that, for this thing, standard TVT is superior. But in my experience, I tend to use TOT more often, and usually the patients of intrinsic sphincter deficiency respond equally. Only thing, results of are slightly inferior as compared to basically hypermobility. So, but either can be done. I mean, even whether it is indexed deficiency or traditional hypermobility, TVT or TOT, they will work in both of them. But just if given a choice, I mean, that is preferred.
In case of CADO, whether we will have to give treatment for the OAB factor first.
You mean mixed incontinence? CADO means? CADO means?
Cough associated detrusor overactivity.
Cough associated, okay. Cough associated, yeah. In that case, basically, it is a type of urgent incontinence only, overactive bladder syndrome. So first, you have to treat it with anticholinergic drug. You can use mirabegron, you can use derifenacin, solifenacin to try to treat that. And if there is SUI component, also you can add duloxetine 20 milligram OD plus what Dr. Agni highlighted, no, like lifestyle changes, pelvic floor exercises, decreased tea, coffee, weight reduction. So what Dr. Agni highlighted, and I also highlight what is important. Many of these patients, in my experience, they are elderly patients. They have been abandoned by the family. They are lying on a cot in the corner of the house, and the family just think that by providing 2 rotis to them in lunchtime, 2 in the night, their duty is over. And the lady is waiting to die. The family is also waiting for her to die. She has lost interest in this thing, and they then tend to gain weight and all. So I had a patient, who her real sister lived across the road in Delhi, and she was 85, 90 kg, and this thing. So when I did I forgot now whether I did a birth for or whatever, but now she has lost almost 7, 8 kg weight. She has, she has become so better. She now goes around every week to meet her sister. Her sister comes, they bitch around about their daughter-in-law. So you can see glamour on her face now. So it helps. And now she said, doctor, I want to lose even more weight. So she has a urge now she wants to live now. So this is very important, proper counseling of them that, and the sad thing is that many of these patients can be actually treated, they can be helped. So to many patients, the problem is that, the people, if they have got bleeding vaginum, they will go to the doctor. If they have chest pain, they will go to the doctor because they can die. If they have bleeding, they think it can be cancer. But if they leak urine, she will ask her mother-in-law, she will ask her neighbor, she's also having. And sometimes she discusses with her elderly gynecologist who also may be having, and they think it's part of normal aging. So they suffer in silence. So the best thing is that you can treat them, and many times the medical treatment only. So please do very noble with them.
My last question is, if the result is not good with the derifenacin or solifenacin 5 milligram OD, is it prudent to add mirabegron or doubling the dose of derifenacin?
I think first you double the dose, like, from 5 you go to 10 milligram of solifenacin, 7.5 to 15 of derifenacin. Yeah, if in spite of that patient is, then only add mirabegron. There have been studies, I mean, head-on collision studies have been there. So they have found that addition of mirabegron, helps them. But only problem is that, like the most of these patients tend to be elderly, and they have either some cardiac problem, hypertension and all, or they may have, closed angle glaucoma or some other symptom. So by combining the two, that also in highest dose, they may not be able to tolerate because of side effects. So that's why I tend to restrict this thing, but you can combine definitely. I mean, if you feel that the patient has got some elderly agent, then you can give 7.5 of derifenacin with 25 of mirabegron can be combined, provided she has no heart disease.
What about Vibegron? When it will be available?
Which one?
Vibegron. Vibegron.
Vibegron, I think should be available end of this year or so. I was checking with the companies, 1 or 2 companies are there. Maybe we can ask Deepika if you can introduce this through your company.
Yes.
This is a new version of mirabegron actually, no? So as sir has said, so sir, I think end of this year we may expect, yeah.
Oh, thank you.
But mirabegron is giving good results till that time, yeah.
Thank you.
Right now we have many questions in the questions session, chat box. So, ma'am, if you could please continue with your questions, ma'am.
This question is for Dr. Ragini. Ma'am, what is your experience with PRP?
So PRP, I haven't used this only PRP. PRP is always used when I give the laser treatment along with that. And what I found, the only laser and combined laser and PRP treatment, those patients are much more respond with the PRP and the laser treatment, and their continuity with the improvement is more when I added the PRP. Maybe PRP is act one as a growth factor, and secondly, it act as a bulking agent also. So we laterally give the from vagina, trans vagina to the periurethral area, just inject the 1 ml of the fresh prepared PRP to the patient.
At what interval?
Usually 1 month interval, we give the laser session and along with the PRP, and 3 sessions are more than enough. Usually 1 session, sometime not given the 1 session, because there is still not a typical guideline or any typical of how to follow it. We are all in the initial phase and giving it according to our own observation.
And my next question is also regarding your slide. What is the role of stem cells, and is this available in?
I have no exposure to the stem cell. Yes, people are doing it in India also. Many people are saying they are doing the stem cell, making a stem cell and giving, but I have no my personal exposure at all, because still a stem cell is quite regulated by ICMR. It was not advised to use anything where you don't have you have a against guideline. You should not use for the indication, so I'm not using it.
Still experimental.
Sir, one question is regarding what are the main causes of incontinence in female?
Main causes are, we have already highlighted that almost 25% SUI, 20 to 25% overactive bladder syndrome, another 40% are because of mixed incontinence, or sometimes like UTI, sometimes because of functional incontinence, or rarely VVF, etc.
So pre-existing.
But I can say first they produce the child, they are under trauma. Then they have a menopause, their hormones left them. Then they become age. So if they have all the factors, being a female, they are going to bound to have the
little bit.
How much exercises helps in them?
Exercises.
Like childbirth, we tell them have pelvic exercises.
Absolutely.
That's enough to prevent SUI in the later age group.
Yeah. In fact, preventive, if you ask Dr. Abdul Sultan, he says, no, pelvis is perineum, either you use it or you lose it. So we must actually, all of us must, in the young age only, we should start actually doing pelvic floor exercises. Don't wait for the SUI to happen. Exercises are good for health, they cost nothing. In fact, my advice to all women that whenever they are at the red light in Delhi after Corona, they should contact their pelvic floor at the red light, and otherwise also every day. It costs nothing, and good for health.
The exercise does.
We should very much focus on the post-delivery rehabilitation for these patients, and not only the pelvic floor. It is their core muscle which is very, very important, because all the pelvic muscles finally going to attach to the core muscle. So exercise in the pre-pregnancy stage, during pregnancy, antenatal exercise, and the postnatal exercise, they are going to be a big way if we really want to prevent or reduce the chances of the urinary incontinence in the woman.
Absolutely. And last year, I visited King's College Hospital, London, Linda Cardozo's clinic. So there I attended their session of pelvic floor exercise, how the, one-to-one session I attended, and how the physiotherapist was advising her. And it was addition to my knowledge also. So apart from the normal, what we say that, try to hold urine, try to hold motion, put a pillow between two thighs, or, pull in abdominal muscle. So what she was saying, deep breath, like what we do yoga. So she said, when we are taking a deep breath, I'm taking a deep breath, so my diaphragm is going down and my all abdominal contents are going down. Then pelvic contents, and they touching my pelvic floor. Okay, so pelvic floor is being touched, goes down. And then when I'm exhaling out, so pelvic floor, basically my contents are going, diaphragm is going up, contents are coming up, so my pelvic floor is going up. So by doing like repeated inhalation and exhalation, long, deep breath, basically you are indirectly contacting the pelvic floor. And because we are taking breath every 12 to 14 times a minute, so the amount of exercise which we'll do with that will be much more than the 10 to 15 minutes exercise. So I was very surprised that, okay, this is so what yoga and all you are advocating probably will be useful for that.
What I talked about the
How many days?
non-surgical options for the urinary incontinence management, especially the SUI, which is most of the women are suffering from that only in the earlier stage. If we offer these non-surgical modalities to our women who are going to the difficult vaginal delivery, along with the traditional pelvic therapy, they are going to be gain a lot. One of my friend who has this HIFM technology with her, what she advised to all her patients to come and sit on the chair 2 times a week for 3-4 months after delivery. And her results for those patients are wonderful. I have just started this HIFM technology in few of my patients. So I think we should focus in the post-delivery patient on the patient. That is a very important.
After how many days of delivery these patients can start this Kegel exercise or this HIFM?
After normal delivery, they can start immediately.
Immediately?
Yes, if they don't
And
have
that is,
this.
I think with episiotomy that might be painful.
Nee,
With
you have to
episiotomy.
see, you cannot say everything is can go for each and every patient. You have to individualize the patient. If patient has having a big episiotomy, tear, pain, yes, she cannot go for a Kegel exercise. But as far as the physical therapist, they have told us that patient can start Kegel exercise immediately and as early as possible. She is comfortable.
Okay.
And for other non-surgical, you can't force the woman to come for this exercise because with a small child. So it is better if they start with the Kegel exercise at the home and other exercise at the home, and then gradually start those, increase that exercise, and they can come for these therapies after 3 months or 6 months after delivery.
So what is the role of Q-tip test? Q-tip test in SUI.
No, that is basically will tell us more of hypermobility and the angle. So Q-tip test will be possible in case of SUI. So we can do it, and it is useful actually. Yeah.
Okay. I think all of the questions are
I have
answered.
one question.
Yes.
Good afternoon, ma'am and sir. Sir, can you please elaborate about the urodynamic studies and how do we decide which candidates are for the urodynamic studies, or are those studies to be done in all patients?
Okay, that's a very good question. But if you see that, if you are a general gynecologist or general practitioner, you don't have to do urodynamics for all cases. Royal College of Obs-Gynae and American College are very clear that if you have got a clear-cut case of SUI, okay, patient has got pure SUI, then there is no need to do the urodynamic studies, and you can even do operation on them. Okay. Similarly, if you have got a patient of urge incontinence or overactive bladder syndrome, in which treatment is medical, there is no need to do basically urodynamic study. You can diagnose them easily and you can treat them because it's a medical treatment only. But what is required is that if you have got a mixed incontinence, or you want to do operation on such patients or complicated case, or who is not responding to initial treatment, then you must do urodynamic study. So initial treatment can be without urodynamic study also. And many times I worry that patients order urodynamic studies and then urodynamic studies, and they don't know how to interpret it. So that is even more difficult actually a problem. So, but high risk cases, complicated cases, or for medico-legal, like Dr. Mala works in Gangaram Hospital, so probably they are doing for all cases, because medico-legally you will be safe if you do urodynamic studies and you are doing operation on them. So, but RCOG, ACOG are clear that even for SUI, I visited King's College last year, so they are doing it for most cases, but they say, I mean, if it's a pure SUI, you can even do birth for her, TVT also for her without doing urodynamic studies. And certainly for overactive bladder syndrome, you can give treatment without doing urodynamic studies. In fact, role of urodynamic study is more to rule out actually detrusor overactivity than to find out SUI, which you can diagnose otherwise also.
Yes, we are.
Sir, please elaborate about
part of the workup for all our patients.
Yeah.
But then I think Dr. Rajesh can answer this question. Detailed workup.
Dr. Rajesh.
What is
yourself?
Ma'am, but please could you elaborate about the urodynamic studies, and can it be done in the Department of Gynecology, or should we send the patient to urology department?
No, basically for urodynamic study, we have to have that urodynamic machine and chair in our department, and one silent room for that.
Correct.
Okay. Or if we don't have that, then we can send them to the urologist. There is no difference. And we have to read that chart. So we have to study the urodynamic studies, these charts, these pressure effects and everything. Then we can do in our department also, in gynec department also.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think all the questions are answered in this session. All the questions of census session are answered. So now we can sum up this session. I want to thank Dr. J.B. Sharma sir, Dr. Ragini Agrawal ma'am, Dr. Mala Srivastava ma'am, and Dr. Deepika, and thanks to Dr. Jackson Pal for this very elaborate and very learning session. And this is very common problem in all the middle age and not in middle age, in early age group also, but middle age and aged patients. This is a very common problem. We have to discuss about this at this platform. Thank you, everyone.
We will soon come again with the next episode of the Urogyne Committee under
Yes,
Dr. Devi Sharma, and we'll connect again. Thank you so much, everyone, being here, and thank you, Jackson Paul, for organizing it, and thank you, J.B. Sharma sir.
Oh,
Bye bye,
thank-
everyone.
Thank you very much. Bye bye, everybody. And definitely we'll do one after a month or so.
Thank you, Bala ma'am.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot to all the experts and all the attendees. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.